recording with everyone alongside the slides. So if you prefer to keep your cameras off so that you're not included in that recording, that's absolutely fine, and appreciate some people might also be having their lunch at the same time. So before we begin, I just wanted to give a little bit of background about the work that we're doing and a bit of framing for today's session, and then we'll hand over to our guest speakers. So the Youth Engagement Network's work that we've been doing, it's PERS, NHS England have set up a peer learning network to support integrated care system leads to develop and share approaches to youth engagement. So at IVAR, we've been facilitating the network through a flexible programme of support, allowing members to share and learn from peers across the country. So we've been doing a series of regional sessions, national workshops, and themed webinars such as today. This is actually the final webinar of the programme, so we're especially delighted to have so many people join us. We'll talk a little bit at the end about kind of what's next for the work and do a little wrap up about what we've done today as a network. The session today is focusing on the National Youth Strategy. So the Department for Culture, Media and Sport are leading the development of this strategy. And it's a bold, co-produced approach to tackling challenges facing young people and ensuring they thrive. The strategy was developed with young people and cross-sector experts, putting them at the centre of decision-making on the policies that affect them. And we're going to hear a little bit more from Kaylee and from Rob from DCMS as well to tell us a little bit about the development of that work and what the youth strategy entails. So first key speaker we're going to have today is Kaylee Wainwright alongside her colleague Rob. Kaylee's the head of youth strategy engagement at DCMS. And then we're going to be joined by Bronte Edwards, who is the NHS Youth Forum lead at Barnardo's, and she's joined by Ashwin, who is a member of the NHS Youth Forum, and they're going to share reflections on what they've heard from Kaylee and Rob's presentation. Then we're going to spend the remainder of the session, so most of the session today, with a Q&A. So please do think about some questions you might like to ask to the speakers. Please do pop them in the chat throughout, and we'll try and get through as many as we possibly can in the time today. We're going to be using a webinar format due to the number of attendees, so we're keeping people muted unfortunately, but please, as I say, do use the chat to connect and ask questions, and I think that's been a really important part of this work. We've got people joining from regions across the country in various different roles, so it's really great to kind of share that practice and connections across the country. We hope that the session's going to go without a glitch, but we know that Teams sometimes has a mind of its own. So if you're having any issues with the chat function or hearing us or anything like that, please do reach out to Alex, who will be able to help. So pop a message in the chat to Alex. As I said, we're going to be recording today and we'll share that afterwards. So if people weren't able to attend, they can watch the recording. So if you feel more comfortable with your camera off, that's absolutely fine. As I've said, we've got such a range of people in the room today, so we thought it would be nice to start with a really quick interactive question. So Alex is going to pop a link to a Mentimeter in the chat. And if people haven't used Mentimeter before, it's a really simple interactive tool. You can join by simply scanning the QR code that you see there. So if you put your phone camera on that, you should be able to link into Menti there. You don't need an account to register. And we just thought we'd say what excites us. So joining here today to hear more about the National Youth Strategy, what are the sort of opportunities and things that excite us about it? And it'd be great if everyone could pop in a couple of words or a couple of thoughts around this, and we'll see it start to populate. Amazing. Collaboration opportunities, giving credit to Youth Voice, finding out more from others, the focus on young people and youth voices. There's a theme coming up around kind of connectedness and cross-departmental or cross-sector work. I love that, activating a new generation with new ideas. So this kind of inspirational, innovative approach. Alex, can you move down slightly so I can see what else is coming up? Something specific around kind of funding to train youth workers. We did a session with one of the regions about that. It's really interesting. Additional investment, more investment. We know that this work isn't possible without investing in the time and capacity and resources to do that. What we'll do, we'll keep it open and we'll maybe come back to the Menti a little bit later. So do keep it open, and we'll compile some of these responses in the notes today as well. But thank you for indulging us in that. Without further ado, I think it's probably time to hand over to Kaylee and Rob, who are going to give a presentation around the National Youth Strategy. So please hand over to you now. That's great.
Thanks so much, Jo. Hi, everyone. It's really great to be here and to meet you all. I'm just going to share the slides, so bear with me a second while we just get that sorted. And if someone could just pop a thumbs up if you can see those, that would be great. Yeah, amazing, perfect. Brilliant. It's great to be here. I'm here with my colleague Rob, and we're both from the DCMS Youth Policy team. I'm on secondment from UK Youth, so probably know some of you from my role there. But if I've not met you before, it's really great to meet you. My role is Head of Youth Strategy Engagement. Have been at DCMS for about a year now and have been leading on the development and engagement around the National Youth Strategy. And we're going to speak to you for about 15 minutes or so on the development of the youth strategy and some of the key policies in it. We've also got a few slides on the State of the Nation report, which was launched at the same time of the strategy, and it has like so much data and rich insights in terms of what young people are saying about what matters most to them. So hopefully that will be useful to you as well. So it's really, really fantastic that the youth strategy was launched just before Christmas. This is the first youth strategy that we've had in England for over 15 years. It's a cross-government strategy that sets out an ambitious 10-year plan that was co-created with young people and the sectors that support them to really boost youth power and support right across government. So we'll talk a little bit more about the co-creation of the youth strategy in a minute. But this is a cross-government strategy, and we worked with over 200 officials from 11 other government departments to pull together all of the key policies that support young people into this framework. And we're continuing to work closely with them on the implementation and also the governance around the strategy as well. So for us, that's really important because whilst DCMS are leading the development of the strategy, obviously young people's lives, you know, are like anyone's lives are like holistic. And it was really important for us to really look at how do we coordinate across government to have this more coordinated approach. So in the strategy, there's two really clear ambitions that we're working to. So over the next 10 years, we want to have 500,000 more young people to have access to a trusted adult outside of their home, and to have half the participation gap in enriching activities between disadvantaged young people and their peers. So they're big targets, they're cross-government targets, and we're looking at ways that we can measure that progress over the next 10 years. But there are two key things that we think are like really unique to this strategy and that speak to what young people told us in the insights. Oh, just missed the slide. So in terms of the co-production, huge thanks to you all if you took part in engagement sessions with us over the last year. Supported young people to participate as well. It was really, really appreciated. I mean, I think we recognise 14,000 responses of young people is really positive. Obviously, there's millions of young people, so it is just a starting point for how government can work differently with young people in the sector. We've definitely learnt so much in terms of how young people can get more involved in influencing policy with government and locally and nationally. But we are really pleased with sort of like what we achieved in this process. There's some examples here of what we did, but it ranged from things like a survey through to focus groups, like young people leading their own sessions. We had a toolkit where organisations led their own conversations with young people, and that fed in directly to our policy team. We then worked closely with the youth advisory group and a group of experts who worked with us to refine some of the policies within the strategy, and had like direct conversations with Secretary of State, which you can see there. It was also really important to us that we worked with trusted partners, many of which I'm sure are on the call, and to engage young people who are really usually underrepresented when it comes to like government consultations and policy making. And so we did specific deep dives, and we worked with trusted partners to make sure that those voices were heard. And like I said, we really want to build on this momentum. Youth power is a big bit of the youth strategy, as you might have seen, and we want to make sure that we're continuing to think about how do we engage in people in a range of ways to make sure that their voices are heard. So, like I said, alongside the strategy, we published the State of the Nation report. Now, this is quite a detailed report. There's also a shorter, sort of more, I guess, accessible version as well, that brings together the results of the survey and also the insights that we collated, and also corroborates a lot of the research that's existing already. For example, from like Youth Endowment Fund, Children's Commissioners research, we work with those partners to do some further analysis in the framing of the strategy. So some of the priorities that we heard from young people, and some of the kind of summary of findings really show that this generation of young people is one that's under pressure. So they report high levels of concern about money, mental health and well-being, friendships and social life, and their future. And these were confirmed from the lived experiences of young people, but also from the wider research. We found that there's a lack of local opportunities. So a cross-cutting issue is the absence of local opportunities for a range of things, to include in socialising, engaging activities, like safe spaces for them to go, which includes like local parks and green spaces, as well as getting access to support for things like wellbeing and employment. Lastly, one of the things that really came through was that a lot of young people feel unheard and unsafe. So particularly young people express a lack of voice in decision making, a lack of trust in politics in general, and a lot of young people feel anxious about their personal safety, especially in public places online. And this was more relevant, particularly for young women in terms of safety. Overall, there's links at the end of the slide deck, which we've given to Joe and the organisers, which you'll get access to. But the survey itself, you'll be able to access all of the data tables. So if you are interested in doing data analysis, you'll see some really interesting things there. But across all of the things that we asked young people, there's two groups that we're most concerned about and that scored were more highly impacted on some of the questions. And these are young people with special educational needs and disabilities, and also those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. So in terms of accessing services, feeling the most pressure under some of the things on this slide, it's those two groups that we are particularly concerned about. The report itself has lots of graphs and like detailed information. We've pulled out a couple that kind of show a bit more relevance to sort of like health and well-being, particularly with this group on this slide. So you can see actually young people, when they're asking for what can improve their lives, lower living costs, definitely the first, the top one across lots of the things that we asked. In the strategy itself, we have referenced like the other work that government is doing around what we would call the foundation, so like housing, child poverty, access to food security, etc., lower living costs. But in terms of the other things, young people specifically mentioned access to better mental health and wellbeing support. And within that, they talked about the role of youth workers in helping them with that and under the trusted adults. But also, as you can see, that access to good quality healthcare is also something that's really important to young people and that they want more of. On the flip side to that, their biggest worries, specifically like mental health and well-being, is up there in the top 5, alongside things like money, what they want to do in the future and how they might be able to achieve that, friendships, and also college and university. You can see here some of the stats from other bits of research that's included in State of the Nation, but lots of young people spending time on screens. Interestingly, young people don't necessarily see that as an issue until they're like a little bit older, or in terms of like how it might might impact their friends and social life. But I think adults definitely have a different view of like online harms for young people. So that's really interesting. We can also see here that the UK ranks quite low when it comes to overall child well-being, and that's something that young people spoke a lot about in our insights. So all of these insights and research like fed into the development of the strategy, and we co-created the vision and sort of some of the big shifts and outcomes that we are working on in the strategy with young people directly. So really with the vision of the strategy, we're working towards every young person, no matter where they're from, having a safe place to go, someone who cares for them, and a community that they feel part of. And within each of the chapters of the strategy, there's different government policies and departments that are doing specific things to work to those. You'll see here the strategy, we're aiming the strategy to deliver on 4 key outcomes. And these are again referenced from the 4 kind of priorities really that that young people said government needs to address. So we want to be making sure that young people feel safe online and offline. We want to make sure that young people feel connected to people in their own age and in their wider community. This is something young people spoke a lot about. They want to feel more involved in community events and feel more welcome and like really have that sense of belonging in their community. It came through a lot. Young people want to build skills and have opportunities at school, work, and in their free time. And young people, we hope, will have better physical, mental health and well-being as well. The strategy itself, we're working towards having these big shifts across all of the outcomes that we're trying to deliver. And like as national government, we definitely want to move away from sort of having big national government programs to a sort of this strategy and a framework that can be addressed and like tweaked based on like local areas of need. So essentially we'll all be working towards these big outcomes, but how those activities are delivered in local areas, we really want to be led by the young people and sectors that support them in those local areas. So 3 big shifts from national to local, helping local authorities to strengthen their local offer for young people and use funding to empower local communities. This doesn't mean that all of the funding that we will be distributing nationally will be going to local authorities, but we definitely want to be looking at how we can help to strengthen their role locally, which we've included in the strategy. We want to explore how to strengthen the statutory duty of youth services as well. From fragmented to collaborative, so lots of the sector deep dives that we did talked about siloed working across sectors, the want to be able to do more collaborative working, but lacking the time and resource and kind of systems around it to enable that to happen. And so we really want to be moving towards a more collaborative way of working. Rob will talk more about some of that in some of the policy areas, but particularly things like Young Futures Hubs, which is aiming to bring together a multi-agency approach to working with vulnerable young people. And then from excluded to empowered, so how do we give young people the power to shape new policies and the tools to shape their community? And our Secretary of State is particularly passionate about this one, really thinking about how young people can have local influencing in funding decisions as well as kind of a national platform. So I'm going to hand over to Rob, who will talk through like the 3 chapters and some of the big key policies under each of them. So over to you, Rob.
Thanks, Kaylee. Nice to meet you all. I'm a policy advisor in Kaylee's team at DCMS. So I'll just take you through the 3 main chapters of the strategy first. These kind of demonstrate the actions that the national government is taking to address the concerns that the young people engaged in the engagement, that the young people raised in the engagement process. We're also interested in how you as more regional and local organisations might want to align with these actions. So chapter 1 is people who care. So this is mostly about supporting the adults in order to help them support young people. Action 1 is about trusted adults and supporting more safe and young, respectful adults to support young people. This might be family members, might be teachers, youth workers, or more informal, like a sports coach. Action 2 is about supporting the workforce. So this is about improving the infrastructure, but also making sure that youth workers have the respect and recognition they deserve. This is also supported by a new £15 million fund to support youth workers, volunteers, and trusted adults. On Action 3, this is about friends and relationships, so supporting young people to build healthy relationships through changes to the curriculum, and also especially having healthy relationships online and working with the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology. Can we go to the next slide, please, Kaylee? Thank you. So this chapter is about places to go and things to do. So it's a lot of the activities in order to like halve the gap between, bless you, whoever that was, halve the participation gap in enrichment activities for the advantaged and disadvantaged young people. So Action 4, Richer Lives. This is supported by a £60 million Richer Lives Fund and also 132 million pounds from dormant assets funding to support disadvantaged young people to access enriching activities. We're also working with the Department for Education on a programme to connect schools with enriching activities in their local areas. On Action 5, this is about supporting young people to get a good job, particularly through DWP's Youth Guarantee, but also more career support through schools and improving education more generally. Action 6, keeping young people safe, working with the Home Office to prevent knife crime and violence against women and girls especially. Action 7 is places to go. So this is a lot of our funding is into building a better youth spaces. So £350 million into building 250 youth clubs, to rebuilding or refurbishing 250 youth clubs, and £70 million into 50 young futures hubs and supporting young local youth supporting youth offers in local areas. Action 8 is about health and well-being. So working with the Department for Health and Social Care, especially supporting young people with their mental health, but also the reforms to improve special educational needs and disabilities for young people, as well as physical health more generally for young people. Can we go to the next slide, please? Sorry, I do realise there's a lot of substance, guys, so I do recommend you read the strategy yourself. But on Action 8, this is delivering with young people. So there's a lot about youth empowerment and youth voice, working to lower the voting age to 16, making sure that young people have democratic education in school to understand that, and also lots of other opportunities to support young people having a say over the policies which affect them on a national and a local level. Action 10, holding us to account. So this is making sure that young people can let us know if they don't think that we've achieved our goals, but this will be including an annual hearing by young people from diverse backgrounds on the delivery of the National Youth Strategy. Could we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So this slide is a bit of a summary of our new funds from DCMS. There's also other funds from other government departments that haven't been included on this slide. And these funds are for the next 3 years. It's also important to say that these funds are very much in development stage, so we can't give you too much information, unfortunately, on all of these right now, but they will be developed with young people. Could we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so this is more opportunities for you to find out more and hear a bit about the strategy. So we are we're partnering up with some national youth organizations to run sessions with young people and regional roadshows. So I've put the links to sign up into this slide. We're also developed a toolkit where you can use slides in that, materials in that toolkit to run sessions with young people about the National Youth Strategy. We're also running a webinar about the data and insights which inform the strategy. And then a final plug for everyone to sign up to my DCMS youth newsletter, which is the best way to find out about everything that's coming up. So I do appreciate that's quite a lot, but I'll pass back over to Joe or Kaylee. Did you want to add anything on?
Yeah. Thanks so much, Rob. Yeah, I appreciate, again, there's a lot of content in there. There's 100 commitments from different government departments in the strategy. So we've just mainly focused on like the DCMS ones, but it also includes things like the Holiday Activity Fund, and other new initiatives that we're working with other government departments on. So I'll pause there. There is a lot of content, but we're really happy to take questions when we get to that stage as well. And we've shared the slides with Joe and the team, so you'll all get a copy of those.
Thank you so much, Kaylee and Rob. That was so helpful. And like you say, there's so much in there. So it'd be great for people to think about what points they would like to hear a little bit more about in the time that we have Q&A. But for now, I'm going to hand straight over actually to Bronte and Ashwin, who are going to share some reflections on what they've heard, as well as some kind of questions for the rest of the people on the call today. Over to you, Bronte and Ashwin.
Hi everyone, so I'm going to introduce myself and then I will pass over to you, Ashwin, if that's okay. Thank you so much, Kelly and Rob, for that. I actually learned quite a bit and I have read it as well. I think just to introduce myself, so I'm Bronte and I am the NHS Youth Forum project lead. So I'm part of the Voice and Influence team at Barnardo's, and then we've been commissioned by NHS England. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the forum, we've got different projects within a wider forum that's made up of around 100 young people. Ashwin, who will introduce himself, is a part of our NHS Young Researchers project, and that is a specific focused national research project, and they go out with surveys across England, and then they develop reports and key recommendations for NHS policy teams. But it doesn't just sit with NHS policy teams, anybody can access it, and we're really open to exploring further conversations with different organisations and professionals. We are also launching a podcast next week, the NHS Youth Forum podcast, and that is because we recognise that not every young person is going to want to join an online forum or has the means to be able to do so. And by that, some people just work better working in person, and some people might not feel comfortable joining a group. So we wanted to create a podcast, and this has come from the young people, to be able to reach young people, but for professionals to also to be able to listen to from a young person's point of view, and then bring in other organisations and professionals onto the podcast so we can question them and we can really have that raw and relatable voice. And then we're also currently piloting a nursing project as well, and then we've got our wider NHS Youth Forum sessions, which is super exciting. So thank you for having us today. I just want to share a couple of key reflections from the National Youth Strategy and what we've heard today. For me, I think inspiration and hope is a step in the right direction. I think it's really empowering to see that youth voice is being highlighted and almost put at the forefront. But alongside that, for me personally, there's also something about the power of language. I personally do not like the word disadvantage when we're describing communities and young people. I think it others them and it puts them in a box. So that's just something for us all from a professional point of view to think about. And Ashwin, I welcome your reflections in as a young person. Because for me, actually, a lot of the communities that we're talking about, and I come from one myself, full of creativity, ambitions, dreams, and joy. And the 10-year plan and the strategy that we're talking about, that is ultimately where we need that support. I love the fact of taking things from national to local, because absolutely different regions have their own ways of doing things, and those on the ground really understand their communities, and that is also empowering, not just for young people, but for young people to then be able to connect the dots to get to that national level, to have those conversations, to then be able to influence change. And Ashwin will touch about on sharing power. I think that's also another really important thing. We speak a lot about youth voice. We speak a lot about giving young people a seat at the table. But then what does that look like when sharing power and allowing young people to create the systems that ultimately support them and then will support the next generation to come? So that's just some of my key reflections. And I do love the fact of seeing it, young people being seen and heard. But in order for all of this to happen, as we all know, it is going to take some work and some real honest work and really connecting with every corner of the United Kingdom, and not just in online spaces and in youth centres where the young people that we know will come and will attend. What about those voices that are missing, and those voices in youth justice and high case child protection, so high risk? So yeah, just something to bear in mind. I'll be quiet, and Ashwin, I will hand over to you. So
Thank you so much for your reflections, Bronte. Just a quick introduction. My name is Ashwin. I'm 21, currently studying in the University of Cambridge, and I've been part of the NHS Young Research Programs for about a year now. I think one of the biggest things from the National Youth Strategy, which I think is really important, is this transition from youth voice to more of youth power. Because Bronte touched upon the idea of having young people not just influencing and giving feedback about some of the programs or some of the schemes that you may be running, but fundamentally being involved in every aspect of a program. And this is fundamentally co-production from just coming up from the problems itself that young people want to focus on, but also all the way towards coming up with the solutions that young people really want. And as we sort of go through this stage and process, I really encourage all of you to sort of look back within your organization and understand how exactly do you currently view young people, and is that an accurate view? And how exactly can you engage all these young people and involve them in every stage of co-production, involve them in every sort of decision, every sort of action, and keeping them involved and in the loop in a really transparent way? In particular, I think with so much information with sort of the national strategy, it's really important to understand exactly what the barriers that your own organization are facing in implementing more youth voice and allowing more young people to be involved in co-production. I think that the NHS Young Researchers Program is a good example of exactly how to get more young people involved in a powerful way. So how this sort of program works is that we hear from like really influential people from across the NHS. We are given sort of training about things like policy and all the different sort of changes that are taking place in the NHS. At the same point, we are given the autonomy to then go on and work on a sort of research project, where over the course of sort of a year, we've now sort of developed a survey, developed a report, and ultimately this sort of information will be used to shape policy within the NHS going forward. And that's a really clear example of how you can work on the balance between lived experience for young people. That's something that's really, really powerful and what young people really want. But at the same time, making sure that you can get that level of influence and ensuring that young people really have that power and the autonomy within decision making. I think also with the youth voice space and generally some things to really consider, especially sort of the diversity of voice that you're encountering when running programs like youth boards or running sort of co-production. I think it's really easy to end up listening to a very specific set of young people, but for you to really improve your impact on all young people, not just some of the voices, it's really important that you work on your sort of recruiting processes and your outreach processes and really make sure that there are things like, for example, remuneration as well involved in some sort of stage. So, for example, so I previously did some work on so like volunteering and cold spots. And one of the biggest issues is if you want to get young people involved from varying sort of socioeconomic backgrounds, for example, it's really important that they have the remuneration, for example, for them to get involved. And that really varies depending on your sort of governance structure and what you can offer. It could be, for example, like financial remuneration. It could be things like gift cards. But it's really important for you an organization to work out exactly how you can best support and encourage young people from different backgrounds to make sure that their voice can really get heard. I also think, especially thinking about sort of accessibility and youth voice, it's really important that you look at sort of the government structure. Previously, when working with NCS, which is no longer here, one of the big changes is that they wanted a youth co-chair, and they went sort of out of their sort of norms to get permission from the government because they were an arm's length body in order to implement that. And so the similar question for your organizations is, what are current limitations within our sort of structure? How can we take the extra step and the extra mile to really get young people involved? And again, looking at some of the barriers and really making sure that you're able to tackle all of these so that you can start focusing on some of the problems that the National Youth Strategy outlines. I think a final really important point is that these conversations need to not just be a one-off webinar. It needs to be an ongoing conversation. It needs to be something which is involved sort of like meetings and youth boards, and generally something that's going to have that momentum of carrying on, because it's really, really easy. And, you know, I've done it as well to sort of be inspired in the conversation, to have a really cool insight. But the truth of the matter is, in order for young people to really be empowered, in order for you to deliver better programs, ultimately these conversations need to carry on over a long period of time. And it's really important that your organizations are able to do this. Yeah, so thank you so much for listening. If you guys have any questions and that sort of thing, I'm really happy to take any.
Can I just come in on that point, Ashwin? It's a really, really important point. And I think just going back to the co-production and young people going on the journey at every stage, it's also really important that young people see every single part of that. And it's not just the empowering part. Actually, it's where we're holding spaces for young people to be frustrated. We're building backup systems, right? So the need to and be a part of that emotional journey that we often go on as professionals, and having our opinions and our wants, and allowing young people to really see that for what it is, especially if they are going to be our leaders and going into this line of work, but they are still the leaders of today and not just tomorrow, because often people say, oh, leaders, and there are future leaders of tomorrow. But actually, no, they're the leaders of today. And I think that shows with voting ages as well, being lowered to 16. But yeah, thank you for that, Ashwin.
Thank you so much, Branton and Ashwin. That was so powerful. And I really loved that kind of reframing of moving from just voice work, but truly thinking about shifting power and autonomy, and making sure young people have the agency and opportunities to shape policy. I can see there's been lots of questions in the chat, which is great. Thank you so much. Not sure we'll get to all of them, but I'll try and pick out a few so that we can talk through them and get some responses from the panel. I also can see there's lots of chat with sharing links and sharing connections as well, so hopefully that can continue. As you said, Ashwin, it needs to be a kind of a constant commitment to doing this work. There's only so much that can be achieved in one space, so please do continue that. I think one of the things that came up first was around kind of alignment, I guess, and I wonder if this is something that maybe Kaylee and Rob can speak to around, in terms of the youth strategy work, the alignment with the 10-year plan, but also the alignment with neighbourhood health. And I wonder if there's any more you can say about the alignment between these different strands of work and how they complement each other, I guess.
Yeah, thanks so much, Joe, and thanks so much for all the questions. We've been also copying them all down. So if we can't get to them all now, we can definitely look to share response after this. So I think for us, the aim of the strategy is that it provides an overarching framework, really, and direction of travel, and for all government departments to be working towards this through the different lenses of their work. And obviously we are at the beginning of a 10-year strategy, so I'm not going to say, oh yeah, everything's perfectly aligned, we're a month after launch, but it is something that we've had a lot of conversations with other government departments and key stakeholders locally about, particularly with the introduction of Young Futures Hubs, which is essentially we'll be rolling those out in 50 areas to support young people in a multi-agency approach, particularly those who are vulnerable to risk of violence and around poor mental health and well-being. So there is obviously going to be lots of crossover with all these different kinds of hubs, and we're working to try and make sure that there is a alignment. But like I said, I'm not going to pretend that is exactly there right now, but when we're developing those funds for the rollout next year. I think also there's a question of like these things aren't going to be in every town, in every city, in every village, and so where are some of the hubs? Where are some of the different kind of hubs, and how can places share like what's going on is something that we're really interested in through networks like this and other things that we're doing. But the hope is that we will have like interministerial groups on the strategy. We're looking at other kind of cross-government mechanisms where we can really track the commitments. And we're hoping through that and the work with officials that we'll be able to have like better alignment across some of these policies so that on the ground it feels more connected and joined up.
Thanks, Kaylee. I think there's another stream of questions, and that's related to the funding initiative. So specifically, I guess, around how decisions are being made around that funding, but also acknowledging the underfunding of children with special educational needs. So I don't know if there's anything else that you can add to that as well. Probably again to Kaylee and Rob, and then we'll have a question for Bronte and Ashwin.
Yeah, definitely. Do you want me to take that one, Rob, or do you want to go?
This is about development of funding, isn't it? Yeah, I'm happy to take this one. So yeah, we are very much in the process of still developing a lot of funds. Unfortunately, we can't tell you loads of information, but we are talking to loads of young people and testing them, especially closely with our youth advisory group, to make sure that they can have an influence on what we're on the development of the funds. The other question was about funding for overall funding. Yeah, so we recognise that over the last period of year, the last 15 years, there's not been loads of funding, and we're not going to be able to restore it back overnight. So it's a period of rebuilding that funding. So we're working with local authorities to rebuild their capacity, including through the local youth transformation fund. Specifically, as you're saying, we know that special educational needs and disabilities is a really serious issue for local authorities. We know that yesterday it was announced that some of the funding on local authorities, the overspend on special education needs, 90% of it might get wiped. So the support on the local authorities on that front, but a lot of those reforms to the system more widely are sat with the Department for Education, and that they should be launching a consultation on SEND reforms over the next month, I believe, along with a wider schools white paper. So we're supporting them, but they are leading on the reforms more widely. So yeah, we recognise that there is a lot of funding, and it's going to take time to build it. Has been a lot of funding cuts, and it is a struggle, but we are taking steps to try and rebuild back capacity.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And just to add to that, there's also the Dormant Assets Fund, which I don't think we mentioned in the presentation, but that's 132 million that will flow out from the National Lottery Community Fund, like with DCMS, with a focus on like access to enrichment activities. And there's also other things like the Holiday Activity Fund, which many of the organisations in this call, I'm sure, will be supporting delivery of. I think for us, I saw a comment in the chat about like the role of youth workers, and I think it links to funding because it's like, how are they employed? They need full time. Like we definitely are investing more in like youth work qualifications, and we've tried to really centre the role of youth workers like central to the delivery of the youth strategy. And so I think we definitely understand that, like Rob said, overnight, we're not just suddenly going to have like 10 times more qualified youth workers, but it's about like, okay, if we're rebuilding, like where do we invest first in terms of training qualifications? How do we align other funding in the system, not just from government, but locally and from other funders to align to the outcomes? And how can we try and work together to make sure there's like benchmarks or alignment in terms of like the youth sector workforce when it comes to like the minimum amount of funding, like youth work qualifications and standards and that kind of thing. So we're just about to obviously embark on that journey now the strategy is out there, but really keen to hear any thoughts on that, on like workforce as well, and as part of like a wider conversation.
Thank you. And I think there's another question and kind of stream, I guess, coming out. And I know that you've responded to it in the chat, Bronte, but I wonder if there's any more you'd like to add, and Ashwin as well, around kind of young people's experience of school. And they were talking about how this kind of interested in whether that came through the report work in terms of their experiences of school, but how this connects to that kind of wider youth voice piece as well. And I know there's some work you mentioned, Bronte, that I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about, or if Ashwin had any reflections.
Yes, so Ashwin, so that was came from the reports from last year. So I've shared the links in the chat, our mental health report and our healthcare transition report. And actually, off the back of that report, there has started to some policy change it's in progress, and we actually are at Parliament off the back of that report with Barnardo's and our young people on the 4th of March. But specifically around school within those reports, school came up quite a bit, and there was positives and there were negatives. A lot of the young people that I speak to, not just hearing from them in the reports, but in general over the 10 years that I've worked with young people, often with schools, there's a big issue around excluding young people and isolation and what that can look like, and how that can also trigger many of our young people. So that's quite a recurring conversation that we have. But specifically when we're looking at healthcare and we're looking at the experiences of young people, a lot of the times young people haven't had the best experience with our healthcare system and also with our education system as well. And with the education system, often it boils down to a lack of understanding of the individual's needs, of what they need at that time, dependent on what it is. And then I don't think it'll be no surprise to anyone, the other side that young people struggle with is waiting lists, and actually the autonomy that they have over their own healthcare and their voice not being heard in that as well. So I hope that roundabout answers that question with the reports. They're a great read and they are completely youth led. The project that Ashwin led on was You Was the Digital, wasn't you? So analog to digital. So the access of that within healthcare. So I can hand over to yourself, Ashwin, about that. And then with the podcasting stuff, I've shared all the details. It's not launched yet, but it will sit on the main Spotify page, and it is the NHS Youth Forum podcast. So if you search it from the 17th, we should show up. But if you want to keep up with what we're doing, we've got our Instagram, we've got Main Channel Barnardo's Instagram, and then there's also my email. We also do have an external newsletter as well. If you drop me a message, I will respond with all the different ways that you can get involved. Ashwin, over to you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think briefly touching upon like the stuff about schools, I think it's really important, especially when considering like the voices and the range that you're getting, is to always look not just as engaging people that are in schools, but looking at people that, for example, are NEET, not sort of in employment education, and looking at really being able to find ways to talk to and get the voice of people that are in like varying different aspects in terms of their education and that sort of thing. It's just really important as well, because I think it's really easy, and it's also, you know, something to link with the national strategy about how do we even access young people. Should we even go through schools, for example, to get more youth voice? But I think it's really important to look at all the different areas, where it's like youth clubs or other places where young people still come together to get their voice. And then briefly on the thing about volunteering, which I mentioned, so that was part of a project which I did a few years ago. I can send this before a few resources about sort of like we're looking at like cold spots and hot spots and volunteering and looking at different ways in which we can engage young people from different sort of socioeconomic and demographics and that sort of thing. So if you just follow up on me, I can send some resources on that. And then I guess briefly touching upon the reports that we were working on. So the one that I was sort of involved in was looking at things like social media, misinformation, but I think generally just going through that entire report process and sort of understanding how young people are interacting with social media was like a really important aspect towards understanding how you could sort of shape youth voice and how young people sort of get ideas across. And I think it's really important for all organizations to look at how to best influence young people, both on social media, but also through more conventional means, through things like youth boards or schools or what those sort of different areas. But definitely give those sort of reports a read, because they do give a really good overview of some of the attitudes and insights about sort of young people within sort of the healthcare space, and that'd be, I think, be really interesting for everyone to look into.
Yeah, and Ashwin's on our will be on our launch podcast. Just to flag for those interested in mental health and education, we do next month we'll be recording it this month, but we'll be releasing a podcast on mental health and education, and we've got some professionals coming onto the podcast, and the young people will be interviewing them. And there's just another point that I think is really important to highlight. So on the concept of youth workers, we often don't speak about the importance of detached youth workers. So not just those youth workers that are in a centre, actually the ones that are out on the street and reaching the young people whose voices are often missed as well. So yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone. I can see we've actually only got 5 minutes left of the call. That's absolutely flown by. So what I might suggest is we'll collate all of the questions in the chat with the answers, and we'll send that as a note following the session. And we'll try and also reach out to the speakers if you're happy for us to contact you to get some more answers if we haven't covered everything within that. So I just wanted to wrap up by saying thank you again so much to all of the speakers today. It was really, really helpful to hear your reflections and to hear more about the youth strategy. And for all the attendees, we've had over 100 people join the session. As I said, this is our final webinar of this peer learning project focused on ICS leads, sharing approaches to youth engagement. And I wanted to say a kind of huge thank you on behalf of IVAR, Pears Foundation and NHSE for attending today and your involvement both regionally and nationally. These sessions have really been made possible by your enthusiasm for youth action and appetite for sharing learning and good practice. Despite what we know has been a particularly challenging time for the NHS, we're really delighted to have been able to work with many of you. So today, we've delivered 12 regional workshops, 2 national workshops, and this is our second and last webinar, really focused on sharing that learning. And they've been attended by over 1,000 people, which is just incredible to see. And we've had some great guest speakers. We can share the links in the chat, including today's guest speakers, but also in one of our previous sessions with Professor Laura Bray, we had Professor Laura Lundy and many more great people come in to share about their experiences and practice that can be taken across the country. But really as well, we've heard so much about what regional areas are doing and thinking about locally what inspiring work is happening to amplify youth voice and ensure that your young people are in the driving seat, as we discussed. Now these sessions are coming to an end, but we will be wrapping up with a kind of final blog sharing our learning, and we're also really excited to see what continues to happen in networks as they grow and continue to innovate. Please do check out the NHS Futures platform channel that we've got. I think my colleague's going to pop that in the chat as well, for you to continue them connections. And like we say, we'll send some notes from today's session alongside the questions, alongside the presentation and the recording. But as we end, I just wanted to bring us back, I guess, to a Mentimeter, and thank you so much, Ashwin, for helping us come up with this question to put back to the group today. So we just wanted to end with a final thought of, from what you've heard today, what would need to change to really genuinely involve young people in shaping better outcomes. And this is something you can maybe put a couple of words to, or there might be particular things that are happening that you want to share. but something for us to think about as we go on with the rest of today. What are the things that are needing to change to make sure that we can genuinely and meaningfully do this and mobilise against the youth strategy?
The Menti responding's turned off, Joe, so it can't submit comments at the moment. Don't know if it needs moving
hopefully,
on.
Yeah, hopefully we can get that result. There we go.
Oh,
is
brilliant.
that working? Amazing. Thanks, Beth.
Thanks.
I thought we were going to get away with a session without one technical glitch, but you know. Amazing. So many interesting things already coming up. Schools funding, like we've discussed, the use of community spaces, I think, is really important, and that's definitely came through from the talks today. Training and kind of that workforce development piece as well. Guidance and governance. There's some great things there that people are going to take away, and we can write up to share. But without further ado, we've actually finished on time. So that's incredible. Thank you so much. Bridget, did you have your hand up? Did I see that? So thank you so much for coming along today and for sharing your Q&A. And thank you again to the speakers. It's been really great running these sessions. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you again in some future work. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.